And welcome back to The Way of the Wandering Wizard. I am Robert Andrew Meredith Kennedy, and I am a pure and open channel for the very finest vibrations of divine love and light, made manifest here in service to Gaia and those who travel with her. Well, welcome back. In my last little videoette, apart from an aside for Project 2021, I was waxing lyrical about my childhood and quite how joyous it had become. What that balanced beginning in life gives us. So it's a vibrant, quite bright 11-year-old. I took my 11 plus. I was borderline. So I went off to have a big interview at the local grammar school. Now, coming from a council estate and living or going to school in quite a modern little school, that's quite an intimidating building with its parquet flooring and the great pictures. And to be honest, it looked a little bit like Hogwarts. I have vague memories of being interviewed by some worthy old scholar who asked me which classics I read, which are clearly, of course, I mentioned Tolkien. I don't think it was quite the classic he was after. What instruments I played, I wanted to play the drums, equally not there. And so, having done a little aptitude test, I was sent outside to wait while Mother was summoned in. He had a quiet word with Mum and basically said, well, if he comes to this school, he's always going to be at the bottom of the pile coming from a council estate. Whereas if you put him to secondary modern schools, he'll be at the top of the bubble and still coming from a council estate along with the rest of the other lads. So the choice was fairly easy. I was bookish, you know. I was fairly tall for my age, but I was definitely a little bit geeky, I would say. And so going to a secondary modern school like Huntley's School for Young Gentlemen was bound to be a bit of a toughening up experience. I mean, many of you watching this are going to grow up in similar ages. School was a little rougher then, from memory, than what my kids are going through now. And what they seem to be going through in sort of emotional and mental stuff, ours was very much more physical existence, I suppose. I went through school towards the top of the bubble. I'll be honest, unlike a lot of my friends, I had quite happy memories of school, really. Clearly I was the butt of a few jokes. I was tall, I was a bit bookish, I was a bit bright, I was always going to be a bit of a target. I can certainly remember some horrendous, freezing cold rugby mornings of being forced to charge down the middle of the pitch, diving into icy puddles, while being generally used as a, if I'm honest, a bit of a punch bag for the first rugby team in order to fire them up, ready for their winning games. Cross-country runs, hiding in the side of the hedge. Probably by then I'd started smoking. That's it. School, of all the subjects, geography I absolutely loved and still do. An understanding of the planet and the planet's processes. Human geography was less interest, but I really did. I absolutely loved. Obviously, I live in a cave full of crystals. I'm going to enjoy geology. Chemistry was another great love. Our chemistry teacher was a bit of a character. I mean, every morning he'd walk in, the gas taps would all be on, fire flying across the class. He'd walk to the front, switch the gas off and carry on lecturing like nothing had happened after a brief shout. Chemistry just seemed to be so much fun. Sinks full of burning stuff, horrible smells, stuff flying out the top of test tubes. Several well-remembered experiments behind glass screens where he nearly lost his eyebrows. And that love of chemistry carried on into my later careers, which I'll cover later bits. I didn't get into many fights at school, didn't get into much trouble at school, didn't have many accidents at school. The only major one was having had a relatively new bike. In the usual mad rush to get out of the bike sheds and plough our way home, I took the inside line and managed to ride straight into the back of an ice cream van, literally straight into the back. The guy came out, looked at me, said, "Are you all right, mate? Do you need any ice?" And apart from obviously seriously bruising my ego and my testicles, and I limped home with the bike with a big dent in the front wheel to have that replaced. But that was my only real incident. The school had physical, it was corporal punishment. It's back in the 80s. We were still caned. I have to say that I was only caned once, being the exemplary student that I am. I was a bit of a climber, and I was able to skinny up between sort of the main building and the sports hall. And so I'd often go up to retrieve tennis balls and footballs and anything else that had gone up there. And one day, having climbed all the way up, chimney style, popped onto the top of the roof, threw the balls back over, looking round in the playground, and I looked down and dropped into the corridor and actually landed on the headmaster's feet. I think he was out there probably having a quiet smoke himself, and all of a sudden I arrived, thud, in front of him. I don't know who was more shocked. I think he was, but anyway, straight to his office, and 5 of the best. It was the only time that I was ever caned. Did it hurt? Oh God, yes. Did I climb on the roof again? Of course I did. Did I get caught again? Oh no. So, as brutal as those regimes are, I certainly learned from it. That's not to make light of this, seriously, you know. These were different times. I mean, I really am. We're the generation where teachers still threw board rubbers at us. They still screamed at us. I can remember irate teachers literally physically grabbing children that were disruptive. It wasn't a common occurrence, but it certainly happened. I say being tall, being fairly bright, I managed to go through school. I had a passion for fantasy and fiction. Well, clearly, I might have played the odd game of Dungeons and Dragons. 1 or 2. I mean, that was my school days. Those were my school days. Happy days indeed. We had a rural science. I went across to Wales. We had tripped on hill farms. I said, you know, this was a very much more physical way of learning. I did all right at ceramics. I wasn't particularly artistic. My languages weren't great, but I sort of took French, but I said just drifted through school pretty much. And I left with a handful of GCSEs and a couple of O-levels, which was quite good for my school. Well, it was clear that I was going to be going on for A-levels, so I went on to college. What a difference. From real boys, secondary, modern, quite a disciplinary rich environment, to being able to wear your own clothes, grow your hair long, and of course, the discovery of many a 16-year-old at West Kent College, beer. I had great fun at college. I suppose most of my early years at college were basically going up to London, up to gigs. At the time I was a mess of hair, in my head anyway. And we'd be off up to the Marquee Club, Hammersmith Odeon, and that was pretty much my life. I started my first part-time job working in a cold store, a famous company that's now a country. But yeah, that was pretty much my introduction to working life, working in a cold store. Whatever money I got, it was all spent on music, back patches, gigs. It's a typical teenage times. I mean, the main crux of the day, I suppose, was teenage underage drinking. I never got caught but once. Val, sorry, my public apologies. I blagged my way into many a pub. Being tall and drinking light and bitter was an advantage, rather than stumbling up to a bar and going, "A pint of lager, please." "What kind of lager do you want, son?" "Oh, any kind." I was straight up to the front. But yeah, halcyon days at college. As I said, nothing great to report. I did have my first shocking experience, to say I'm working in a cold store. A lady came out and said that one of the freezers was making a funny noise and there was water coming out of it. And as I reached forward to switch it off, yeah, the front of the freezer was live and I ended up being catapulted across the corridor. I must be a good conductor, or whether that started my wizardly awakening. But I recovered from that. And this is apart from a habit of thoroughly enjoying working in cold environments and developing a fair knack at being able to rugby passer, frozen turkey at Christmas as we unloaded. That was pretty much my college years. I went off and started work. My first job was on the motorways. That was a great job. I worked in the labs, analysing all of those wonderful things, building materials that we use. I'd passed enough at college, when I left with poor A levels. Probably on account of the beer. Definitely on account of the beer. But you live and learn. Well, eventually we live and learn. So I started my first job, working on the A21, the local motorway as it was being bypassed at the time. Early starts, working hard, generally ended up in a pub somewhere, and I have to say that they were great months. I started to bulk out a bit. Obviously working outdoors suited me and started a bit of a pattern in life. That job, basically, as the job came to an end and the lab started to roll up, the next job was moving on to another project, and as I didn't drive at the time, I started looking for serious day work, a proper job. And I could have had a career in motorway construction and analysing materials. It's good work. I remember chatting to one of the old lads and looking at him and him going, "You want to get out of this game? It's hard work." And I looked at him and went, "Why is that?" He went, "How old do you think I am?" I don't know, 50, late 50s, 60s. Turned out he was a little over 40. It was at that point that I decided that maybe that would be too hard a career and I ought to be doing something a tad more sciencey. And with more of that when I applied for my first job, which was 16 years of my life. My bang it and bend it years at Fort Halstead. But I'll do a little storiette out, because remember, throughout this story, I'm still in recovery after my third operation, lying around, waiting for my next big op, the repair of my foot. As always, thanks for listening to a Sunday morning ramble through some of my teenage years. I was going to do a great epistle and tell great tales and fill up hours of exciting life. And then my mother reminded me that everybody needs to remember those years. But I will do a few little bits of my wilder tales, maybe around a fireside one night. But as always, thanks for listening. Again, as my story unfolds, it was important for me as I told a tale of the traumatic experiences around my accident 9 years ago, that it also came in context with a life, a good life, a life well led before that and after that. Because like everything in life, although these huge peaks and challenges are there, they're balanced by the brighter, lighter, more family orientated, more loving, peaceful experiences. And on that happy note, I better go off and cook a roast dinner for my family. Thanks for listening. Have a joyous Sunday. Take care, go well, and blessed be.